Good evening, everyone. I think most of you know me. For those of you who don't, my name is Scott Nemenich, presently with the law firm of Hinshaw & Culbertson. I am here tonight as General Counsel for the school district, Special Counsel for the city, and here to moderate, or shall we say, help with the presentation of the special meeting, which, as the mayor pointed out, if you look at the agenda, is a presentation regarding cooperative planning projects. If you bear with me for one moment, I'm going to go off that agenda simply long enough to perhaps offend somebody here. I hope I don't. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm going to speak on behalf of all three boards, saying we wish Tanner Rourke very well. He's our owner. I know Tony's a Cub fan. But the bottom line is, one of our pitchers out of this town won, and I think we're all very proud and appreciative. Now, like I say, tonight is a presentation to talk about the cooperative ventures in planning. This emanates from approximately a year and a half ago. And it started with the city, Mayor Orr, and a gentleman named Scott Seipel, who you'll meet very shortly. What this is about is public cooperation with private entities. It's about taxing bodies working together. It's about doing something as a team to help the entire community. Now, having said that, what's being presented tonight, is this in gold? No. Has anybody voted on it? No. It's a status report, basically. It's giving you an update of what's happening. It was my idea to ask that all three boards be together here tonight, so you hear from one voice, you hear it one time. Not that you hear one set, you hear one set, you hear one set. No, rather, everybody hears the same thing. And then we can all be up to speed and see what's happening. To me personally, I think this is very exciting. I think not only is it exciting for this community, but it's exciting for its citizens, the educational aspect of it. There's a number of things that you can hear about tonight. We also have on our guest, we have the Chief Executive Officer of Will County, Larry Walsh, because we've gone so far now as to be talking with our Chief Executive Officer in regards to federal funding through perhaps even the White House as far as working toward, and Congress, working toward getting the funding for what you're going to hear about. But rather than me speak any longer on that, what I want to do is turn this over this time to Mayor Orr. Mayor Orr? To Tony? You're perfect.
I don't know if I need this or not.
I delegated real quick.
You delegated. You're doing a good job, man. I'm glad to be here. The city, as Scott talked about, we've been working with this project for many, many months. One of the key components where this is unique in one way, but it actually isn't. Because when you start talking about schools, schools are the focal point of all communities. And it's a natural process for us to probably start working together, develop a vision plan for your complex out here. Because as we all know, this school was built with the anticipation of some expansion. We have some nice land available. So it became a natural partner for us to reach out to the schools when we started looking at some of the ideas you see on the vision plan. Where can we locate, community center? Where would be the best location to maybe bring an educational component, resources for like library. So as we started working together, we developed this beautiful document that was done by our architect. Many, many hours in regards to this. This project, I know Scott Nemenich probably reiterated this, we are really looking at no tax dollars to be applied to this, no referendum. Now, I say no tax dollars, basically capital dollars. The city's involvement will be some of the soft costs, which is basically my man hours and some staff man hours working on this project. And the main component of this is going to be three boards, ultimately, if they all decide independently and collectively that this is the right thing to do to keep moving forward with school community One of the things that's a benefit to this, to our community, with this is the economic engine that can be driven from this, not just the jobs and construction. But most communities where they have an educational, intellectual component for economic development, especially for recruiting, employment base, those communities usually have a little better chance of bringing other businesses in, especially more diverse businesses. And one of the things that they're knocking on our door when the Michelins of the world are looking at Bridgeport, they're asking, where can we find the next employee? And where can we find training in the area? So one of the components of this is to work with the corporations creating some type of training center involved here. So when you start putting all the pieces together, how do you develop a plan that is going to incorporate, when we say not going to the taxpayers, you're going to have to look at what's the value for a corporation that says I want to put $1 million on a project like this. Well, creating an added value benefit if we could develop that vocational training. Also, meeting space. Today we're out at CDC Supply that they're coming into the community. And one of the things that the CEO was talking to the mayor about is they do a summit where they bring in 75 to 80 users that make them interested in their company. And they host that summit. And we mentioned, well, how about if we got a nice facility, you can host that summit right in your own backyard. And with all the high-tech bells and whistles, his eyes just lit right out. So I think we're going in the right direction. We don't know that. We need to get community involvement. We can't just sit here ourselves. I think we have all the answers. And the boards, working together, I think it's going to be an exciting time as you walk through the process. And it could be a process where we just say no. So nothing's attached to any of this. So I will turn it over to Scott Newman. He'll introduce the next guest, which is sort of the glue to this project.
I'm going to introduce to you Mr. J. Scott Seipel. Mr. Seipel's had a rather interesting life. He's a constitutional lawyer. His father is 100% Dutch. His mother is 100% Cherokee. As he would tell you, he's grown up living in both the European world and the Native American world, spending half his time in Europe and many of America's major cities, and resting on the Cherokee Indian Reservation in Electra, Oklahoma. If you spend any time at all with Mr. Seipel, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're going to receive a lesson in American history. I was a history major at Lewis University and then received my law degree at Northwestern. I will tell you, I knew nothing about true Native American history until I met this man and had him talk to us and explain what really happened and what we, to be very frank, in a lot of respects have covered up over 200 years. He's been involved with the American Indian Center, the National Congress of the American Indians, the American Indian Movement, the Smithsonian, the Chicago Museum of Natural History, the Office of the Attorney General, and the Chicago Blackhawks. He's opened our eyes to the true history of Native America, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy his presentation. Mr. Seipel.
Hello, how are you? I have a big mouth, so I don't know if I need this or not. Can you all hear me? First of all, thank you very much for allowing me tonight and share time with you. I certainly appreciate it. As Scott mentioned, first of all, today is a very historic night. Do you all know what tonight is? James 6. I wish. And they played the last game of the third period will be okay. So keeping up with that. As Scott mentioned, I grew up in two worlds, both the European world and Native American world. In the summers, I would go to Tahlequah, Oklahoma, to be with my mother's family, and watching the discrimination that occurred to my grandmother, my grandfather actually prompted me to go on the wall. I can remember as a little child having to desperately go to the restroom and not being able to go to the restroom in Tulsa, Oklahoma because my grandmother was dark-skinned and I was not, so I couldn't go. I can remember being famished and wanting to have lunch. As a 5-year-old kid, you don't really understand why, but not being able to eat at a hamburger stand because it was white only. But I came to Illinois, was brought here to Illinois as Director of Ethnic and Minority Affairs for the Office of the Attorney General. In that capacity, I traveled throughout this beautiful state and fell in love with Illinois, promoting laws and teaching material relating to ethnic and racial minorities throughout the state. I truly do love Illinois, and there were always two places that were of particular interest to me. One was Ottawa, Illinois. The other was Wilmington. These areas were of interest because once upon a time, in the not too distant past, both of these areas were epicenters for the Native American culture. Illinois actually had a huge Native American population. Ottawa, as many of you know, is one of the top tourist destinations in Illinois. And a lot of that has to do with the native folklore that surrounds Ottawa. And Wilmington, on the other hand, is probably Illinois' best kept secret. The Illinois area is actually very, very significant. And it's significant because it's where the three rivers meet. The Des Plaines comes down and meets the Kankakee to form the Illinois. It also was the area where three great tribes in Illinois converged to meet. You have the Potawatomi from the north and the west, the Kickapoo from the south, and the Ottawa from the east. The island of Wilmington was actually the principal village of the great warrior chief Pontiac, who also was an Ottawa. And the name Kankakee is a Potawatomi word that actually means mother's breast, or a giver of life. My journey with the village of Wilmington started just over a year ago. I was developing legislation to introduce to the Illinois Senate and the Illinois House to teach Native American history in Illinois. And we were traveling, I was with Marty Orr and Tony Graff, and we were traveling north going into Wilmington. And I told them, stop. Stop, 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 stop. They thought I was crazy, on the road, and I showed them an Indian boundary line. And I told them, you know, gentlemen, 150 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to pass this boundary line. In fact, if I had passed it, even though I'm only 50% Native American, I would have been shot. And that is the southernmost Indian boundary that was originally established in Illinois. The northern boundary is in the city of Chicago in Rogers Park. And so we started talking, and that conversation turned into a friendship. They introduced me to Scott introduced me to Dr. Jay Pleasy. Dr. Jay Pleasy introduced me to Larry Walsh. And we started talking about how significant Wilmington is. You're completely surrounded by Native American history. To the north, Medewan grassland. Medewan actually is a Native American term that means medicine woman, medicine man. You have the Kankakee that cuts right through the heart. It was a huge, huge area for Native Americans. I had been working for some time with the Chicago Blackhawks to establish a Native American educational center and a Native American curriculum. And when I shared this with Dr. Pleasy, he said, well, I don't want to wait for legislation. I'd like to teach the curriculum now. And I want to recognize Dr. Pleasy. It really takes a significant amount of courage and leadership to be the first in the state, to be the first in the Midwest, to teach a Native American curriculum. Native Americans, for the most part, are a forgotten race in America. And it's sad because in Illinois, they played a major part in helping with white settlement. You have Shabbat, who was of Ottawa, but he married the daughter of a Potawatomi chief, and he ruled over all of northern Illinois. When Blackhawk, who was a Sauk, led the Blackhawk War in 1832, he came to Shabbat and asked Shabbat and the Potawatomi to join him. The Sauk were always a small tribe. They never numbered more than 5,000, but they were like the Spartans of the Midwest. Everybody feared them. That's why the hockey team has their name today. But Shabbat said no. And Shabbat actually traveled throughout northern Illinois, warning white settlers of the Sauk, and saved many white settlers. Today, he's actually buried in Morris. What we're trying to do in Wilmington is very significant. I just got back from Anaheim. Anaheim is a very large city, but to the south, there is a smaller city called Orange. And Orange, about 25 years ago, became known as a progressive educational center. They really had very little industry, they weren't close to any major highway, but they started recruiting speakers to talk on culture, on religion, on race relations, and they became known as a very progressive educational center. What led after that is many high-tech companies wanted to relocate there because they wanted to be close to a city board, close to a board of education that was progressive thinking. And today, Orange is known as one of the top learning centers in the country. So I applaud all these gentlemen, Scott Minnick, Tony Graff, Marty Ward, Dr. Cleese, for stepping forward and really being very progressive thinking in the teaching of Native American studies. Now, when Scott first invited me to talk, he said I had to condense a 2-hour presentation into 10 minutes. And if you know anything about lawyers, it's very difficult to do. But I will keep it short because I actually have an obligation to be at the Black Hawk Day tonight. And, but I want to end by sharing with you, I spoke to the Chicago Black Hawk team and to their entire executive board just before the playoffs. And to the team, Joe Punto asked me to talk about Black Hawk as a warrior and the soft pride of Spartans. But for the executive board, he wanted me to talk about the ethnic cleansing of Illinois and what really happened in Illinois. So how many of you know or have heard of Judge Surratt? He's one of the announcers for the Black Hawks. I pulled him up. We had interaction, and I actually quizzed him on Native American questions. He flunked. There were 30 questions, but today I have just 4 questions. So I want to ask, how many of you have seen a late night spaghetti western? Raise your hand, please. Okay, those of you who have seen them, please forgive them. They're totally fictitious, and there's nothing about them is true. How many of you have been to an actual Native American reservation? Yeah, it's great. Excellent. Well, I have you come up. There are a few questions to ask, only 4. Okay. So, yeah, and these are the type of questions that are in the Native American curriculum. And again, they're intended just to educate. And it talks about a topic that's very important locally because it starts off as bullying us against them, but it can grow into something much worse than that. And that's ethnic cleansing and genocide. And it's something that doesn't just happen once. It happens over and over and over in society. And I have 4 daughters. So to teach children, hate and prejudice and discrimination is something that's learned. It's learned from the parents, it's learned from the grandparents, but it also can be unlearned. You can teach kids the right way, the progressive way to do it. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Question number 1. In the Western Hemisphere, who was the first great slave trader? Columbus, that's correct. Although we celebrate Columbus Day, Christopher Columbus, if you read in his diary, and everything I share with you is in the National Archives, and I encourage you to research and read for yourself. The very first paragraph, he talks about on my arrival, the native inhabitants are beautiful, statuesque, kind, benevolent. In the second paragraph, with 50 armed men, we can take the whole island. And in fact, that's what Columbus did. He took the whole island of Hispaniola. On the eastern part is the Dominican Republic. On the western part is Haiti. And at that time, 1492, 1493, Haiti had large gold deposits. So in 1493, when Columbus returned, he returned with 1,500 men. And the Native Americans of that day were called Taino. And the Taino were subjugated. 25 years later, they were a visiting state. Second question. Is there any example with the United States Congress where a law of ethnic cleansing was actually passed? No, close. The Indian Removal Act of 1832 was passed. And under the Indian Removal Act of 1832, and if you read a lot of the towns, especially up and down the Fox River, they were established in 1833, 1834, 1836. They were established after the Indian Removal Act. Anybody with one drop of blood, unless you had official permission by the federal government, you were forced to leave Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and if you resisted, you were removed by the military. That was what the blood law was. Third, excuse me, Andrew, you got very good. Third question. Scalping. Is scalping indigenous to the American continent? Exactly. So much is talked about with Native Americans and scalping, and actually, scalping was not indigenous to this continent. It was actually introduced by the Dutch and the English. In 1755, a proclamation called the Phipps Proclamation was passed. And with the Phipps Proclamation, you were paid 50 shillings for every dead male that you brought in, 40 shillings for every woman that you brought in, and 30 shillings for every child under 12 that you brought in. Carrying in dead bodies became too cumbersome, so they started scalping. The scalping Indian here is very distinct, and so the scalps were known as redskins, and they were treated just like beaver pelts. And in fact, as late as 1890 in the state of California, the state was reimbursed $1 million by the federal government for redskin mountains. Last question. Adolf Hitler. The death marches and the internment camps. Who was Adolf Hitler's model? It was the Walmart on the death. And if you read Adolf Hitler's diaries, he talks extensively about his admiration for the English and their internment camps in South Africa during the World War, as well as the Americans and their Walmart, the Trail of Tears. In this area, it was known as the Trail of Death. The Potawatomi, who had never fought against anyone, the Miami, the Tickapoo, were all removed out of Indiana and Illinois. It was known as the Trail of Death. It was known as that because they were intentionally marched starting in the fall of the year. They were marched where they had no winter clothing, there was no food. If you read the accounts, and it's documented by the Catholic priests that walked with them, and they would walk 1,000 miles. And I don't know if you've ever walked even 10 miles, but 1,000 miles is a considerable amount of distance. For the Cherokee, it was actually 3,000 miles. If you read the accounts of the Catholic priests, the first to die were the old people and the children, and the military didn't even give them time to bury the dead. So, what we're trying to teach is not shame-based history, but what we're trying to teach is just the reality of Native life then and the reality of Native life now. I'm always shocked when people introduce me as a Native American. They always expect me to come in months and feathers and things. There are many Native Americans that are doctors, lawyers, politicians, CEOs, and we are a race that has been forgotten. And I think it's important, especially in this state. The state is so heavily populated with Native tribes that we teach our youth the truth and what happened. Those who forget history are doing the repeat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. I'd like to next introduce very briefly our Will County Executive, Larry Walsh. Larry, if you would like to add a few words.
Thanks for the invitation to be here tonight. I think I applaud Wilmington School District on this endeavor. It's, when it was brought to me a couple of weeks ago, it was very interesting, very intriguing, and my commitment to Jay Cleese and Tony Graff and Scott and other Scott, that anything I could possibly do to participate to help the creation of the knowledge of what's taking place what's going to be taking place here in Wilmington. I believe that the issue of teaching a course about Native Americans in high school is very, very important and interesting. So I know Scott Nemec always feels I got a direct line to the White House and the First Lady and everything else, which I don't. Maybe I used to, but I don't have it lately. Anyway, but I'll do anything at all to try and help to get support from them. Michelle Obama has taken it as one of her issues that the understanding of Native Americans here and what the role they played is very, very important to her. And I would make sure, even if I had to fly out to Washington and meet with her, to encourage her to look at what is being proposed here and ask for her total commitment, because I think this is a very unique issue here in the state of Illinois and right here in Will County. So I have gave my commitment to continue to participate in the discussions that are going to take place, and that you've got my word that anything I possibly can do as a personal favor, asking of the president or his wife, I would certainly go to that stage and make sure that it got done. So I think we don't understand right now how important this whole issue can be, and such what history you could be creating here by following through with this proposal. And I think that a lot of the students in Wilmington High School would find it very interesting to take a course, whatever it's one semester or whatever it may be, in regards to what history took place right here in their own backyard. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn more about what the whole process is going to be, and but most importantly, my commitment to participate and work with you is always available. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jay, for the invitation to be down here tonight. And I'm very, very interested in hearing all the discussion coming from all the different boards that are going to make a decision on whether this is a worthwhile or not project to take under our wing. So, thank you, Lord.
Larry, I believe you have connections to everybody, even the big guy. No. In any case, what Larry didn't mention and what Scott just kind of briefly touched on was right before we met with Larry, he received the facts. And the facts came from the Vice President of the Chicago Blackhawks, Jay Blunt, saying that they were behind this and would be supportive of it. And they are. I've heard that myself. Mayor Orr's heard that himself. Dr. Pleasy's heard that directly. We've heard that from the Vice President. We've heard that from the number 3 man as well. They have a very strong interest in this. Obviously, the name Blackhawk, they have a natural interest there. Through Scott Seifold, who's introduced us to them and made this all possible. We have a commitment from them for their assistance, to a point where they've asked that a foundation be established. And we're in fact establishing this foundation right now. It's going to be called Blackhawk Society. To help obtain funds for these projects if this is the route you want to go. And like I said, this is only informational tonight. This is something that each board is going to want to talk about, deliberate, and make a determination. All right, is this the route we want to go? One of the aspects of it is the Native Educational Center, which is, in effect, a very large auditorium and part of the community center. And this is where we're looking for the federal funding. As Tony Graff said earlier, we're not looking for any referendums from the school or the city to fund this. We're looking for outside support as well as what we already have. So that's where it's at. At this point, I'd like to introduce to you my board president, Tim Craig. If you step forward, you obviously did pretty darn well in that. Please.
Like I said, I was cheating because my wife being part of the Cherokee tribe. Very briefly, I heard about this about the same time our board did, about 2 months ago. Jay had brought it in, talking about, basically probably a lease or something to plan. And I heard about it, I was like, hey, it's exciting. But the more I heard about it after our elections and I became president, I was able to sit down with Scott and everybody, and Marty and Tony, and start hearing actually some a little more of the details, and it became very, very exciting. And Paula, we were talking about this, and I did some of your comments, probably at 8 years, I don't know if you were involved with those, but and exciting, besides the educational part of it. If you've never been to Paula, I'm telling you, they're unreal, and you're talking thousands and thousands, tens of thousands actually show up for these. So I'm really excited. But Jay, Dr. Cleese knows much more about it than I've only been involved in a very short time, the same as our board. So Dr. Cleese, you can come up here.
I'll choose not to use the microphone. I think everybody can hear me. Mr. Rolla, how long ago was it I asked you for a little packet of things? I think you're right. I said to him, I want some Indian artifacts. And so I had 5 or 6 bags of artifacts brought in, and I sat down and I trained proudly a few days later with Scott Cycle and Scott Hemming. So thank you. He was always wondering, where was I going with that question to him, and why did I want Native American artifacts?
Oh, you're going away from hard now.
I just want to say thank you for your kind comments tonight. But as a superintendent, my mission is to always try to make a community better. And I've always believed in that through education. Education is the great equalizer, and I've had people challenge me on that. Say it's not an equalizer, and I said, then you don't understand it, because education is the great equalizer. If you can come from a very poor background, and you can get a good education, and you can go on and be as successful as you want. And so, I want to thank Executive Walsh for coming down and thanking Reagan tonight. Appreciate everybody coming. But we started out with an idea when I first met Scott Cycle through John Eminich, Tony Graff, and Marty Ward. I met a meeting or so, and then I just kind of walked away, and you say, gee, I wonder if there's anything to this. Will it ever materialize into anything? And I suppose we had a few meetings, and I still pondered that idea. How will the children fit into it? How will the school fit into it? And how will the community fit into it? And so I can remember a brainstorming session with Tony Graff, actually. He came over and he said, how could we make this thing go forward, and what do you see happening? And he had talked with Marty on several occasions, and they were involved quite a long time before we were. But I said, well, it would be fascinating to offer the curriculum right away. And I said to Scott, we can do that. We can plug in a few weeks into our history course and begin that. And I had talked to the board shortly after Christmas and said, I just want to know, would you be interested and would you support this? And at that time, the board said, yes, we would. And then offer an elective course. But I said to Scott, I said, now, if I offer an elective course and the board
Board of Education wants to put that in their curriculum offerings, which I think they will. How can you help me do this? Now, as you saw, he brought in a few prompts tonight, and I'll let him cover those. But I said, I will need help doing this. You know, you have a connection to the Blackhawks. I would like one of them to come down and be a guest lecturer for this class, because if I tell my high school kids one of the Blackhawks are coming down, and I can have 5 different tribes of the Native Americans come down and show artifacts and talk about the real history of Native Americans, I said I will have kids very interested in that class. But you have to help me because I don't have the knowledge for that either. And he has been obliging in every possible turn to say, we can do this. And so all of a sudden I saw a partnership forming between the city and between the school and between Scott and the Blackhawks and various organizations. And so where can we go? How can we even expand it more? So we talked about the fact that we know industries are building in Wilmington. And we've always been a very blue-collar community. It's always been very successful for us. People have made good livings. How can we help to provide training to those folks? And so, can we get some buy-in from business and industry to build a place where we can help train? Of course, I'm always greedy. How can my children benefit first? And after we do that in the evenings, how can our community or adults benefit? If we can provide training, our kids go out to the 150 Center right now. It's a fantastic opportunity if they want to go out there. But how can we do more close to home? At the Career Center this year, I know one of the biggest problems that Matt brings back to us, and Peggy brings back to us, is we didn't used to have a full welding shop. Now we've had to turn kids away. How can I provide more welding in Wilmington, Illinois? Because every article I read, there's great jobs and opportunities. So you always try to think, where can we go from here? How can we have facilities closer? But more so, how can we have more partnership? How can we as a school and as a city, possibly as a library, which is an educational facility, or others, how can we all get together and say, we're on a mission that we know is to benefit our community? And how can that benefit not only our community and our kids, but how can we do it as a group versus independence? Because it just makes sense. It makes sense for the money generation. It makes sense for people from the outside to buy in. So I think that was a real piece of interest. I still say that Scott Seipel is a fulcrum to this whole project because of what he brought to the table. And he's a driven man. That's kind of something that's intrigued me. It's not, well, let's just have a meeting and see where it goes. We have a meeting, now we need a curriculum. A short time later, there was a curriculum, at least an outline for what we could do teaching a course. And so then we grew farther than that, and we said, what other things can we look at? I know that this community has wanted an auditorium since we built a referendum. And I know we need an auditorium. That's a critical piece for what we have to build. And we always want more facilities for health and fitness and other options. So you always look at those. And so I don't think any of the stuff that will be discussed tonight is something that can't be accomplished. I don't believe in people that tell me I can't accomplish something. I only tell you that I can. And I think that we can. And you have to believe that you can. I came here 11 years ago, they said we can't pass a referendum and neither can you. I said you couldn't pass a referendum, we can pass a referendum. And we did the second year I was here. Because we engaged the community to do it. And we have to engage the community, and that's why you're all here tonight. This isn't something I'm going to do, or Scott's going to do, or Tony, or Larry, or Marty, or any of our board members. This is something we all must either support, or it's not an endeavor that one can do on their own. I think it has to be a group effort. But I believe there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of industries out there looking for training, and I think Larry could attest to that. He constantly deals with these big intermodal yards that say, how can we provide more training to get more people? Because in America, we took a pendulum swing really high that all children must go to college. And it's been driven for the last 30 years. It's been driven hard. And I'm not in opposition to going to college, obviously. That's a wonderful opportunity for those that want to go, and they have a mission for going. But you're starting to see America say we don't have manufacturers anymore. We have a lot of people about to retire in the trades. And we have none of you guys training anybody for the next generation. We need to do more training for the next generation because those jobs pay good salaries. And I think we have a curriculum that offers our college kids an opportunity. We need more for our vocational. We have a wonderful vocational center. I'm not saying we don't. But the more we can do close, we started a program with our two neighbors a couple years ago, and our numbers went up in our vocational programs because they're closer. Closer means you can go easier. You don't have to take all of the time. So I think there's all kind of elements that fit into this, but I think this is a concept and a vision, and I think it's a point that we want everybody to rally around, and we need more meetings to come up with what exactly is the plan going to be. Because I think you have to have a goal, you have to have a plan, you have to have partners. This plan obviously would have to have a lot of intergovernmental agreements, which the lawyers will thrive with. It's called Scott Nemenich. I won't say this to Scott Seifel. He's a good friend. I've known him for just a short time. But this guy, I keep my stopwatch out. How long did we talk? He attest to that.
This meeting's will be 4 hours.
I know it. I think you have to have these partnerships to have a plan and come out with an objective. And I believe that this is something that's so exciting. And I think we're in the infancy of a plan that has a great opportunity, and I think it's very doable. I really do. I believe that in my heart. I believe we have a lot of people outside of the school district with an interest to help us. And so I say, or I hope, that we can move forward.
This time I was going to ask President Smith, wish to comment.
Scott, I want to say something.
Sure, please, Mayor.
I know I kind of defer to everybody else. Just kind of giving you a little bit bigger history or a little bit more background. It started with I had the opportunity to meet Scott for about a year and a half ago. And kind of really started this whole podcast concept. And listening to him educate myself as well as Tony about the Native American history that was going on and what had happened, what had occurred here. Really, naturally sparked interest and what kind of influence and what we could have with the Native American culture back in the day. And hearing what the islands represented to the Native Americans. And then really kind of, to be honest with you, when we started this whole podcast, kind of my focus or our focus was to create a cultural center or museum on the islands. It's something a little off the island somewhere where people are coming down Route 66. To kind of have an opportunity to stop and see this type of culture that occurred here. And that's kind of where it started, and that was really kind of let me believe when I looked at this whole picture on this, what we just talked about, this something real small and insignificant. Now we look at this potential that it can be for this community to be tremendous. And the one word I really want to focus on when you look at that little square is community. This building will building won't be decided by school board or city council or library. This is really going to be decided upon by the community itself. We have a responsibility to educate our community as much as we can to get them to the right force behind this type of project. Because as we talk about the vocational and everything else, Cornerstone really is the Native American curriculum, how it works, what is really the basis of this area. Everything else is going to be great. And I think as we go through this, one of the things we've heard about company fund. We are already at the forefront when we talk to potential companies coming into the city. We bring it to the forefront of what this idea, what this vision is as far as the community center and health and waste and data collection. And it's amazing to hear that there are large corporations out there that are involved or interested in this community that actually have offshoots of private relations. They have private relations with people within their own corporation that deal with these type of things. So it's very exciting because I see this going forward. And that, it's kind of like I put it out there, it's really a community plan. And we're excited to see it. I'm excited to hope that this thing comes to fruition. May take a year, may take 2 years to get everything we want, may take 3, but I think it's very vital.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cliff Bender is the next one I have on the agenda to basically lay out what we have here. But I want to ask first, Mr. Seifel, I know you have the other engagement. Do you want to show us what you have here?
If I may just state quickly, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Chicago Blackhawks. However, they have told me, and I know that they're very, very excited about this program. And they have said that to have the Chicago Blackhawks, which now is one of the most popular franchises in any sport in the entire United States, to have them here in Wilmington. When I was asked to speak to the players, I was thinking, oh my God, most of these guys didn't go to high school. They're athletes. I'm sure they skip history. They'll be asleep in 5 minutes. And they actually have asked me to come back several times. Someone like Jonathan Tays, who is from Winnipeg, actually grew up close to an Indian reservation there called First Nations. He has a big interest. They have been very receptive to anything and everything that I've asked them to do. Scott has heard firsthand them tell him, hey, anything we can do, we will do. Marty has heard that, Jay has heard that, Tony has heard that. So to have the Blackhawks in Wilmington, Illinois, I think is an extremely exciting possibility. And Jay is right. We want to motivate students, having a Jonathan Tays here, or Patrick Sharp here, or Patrick Kane here. I can't think of anything that would excite them more. And I feel very confident that that sort of thing is very doable. I'd like to talk to them about the possibility of a winter classic here, where when they have time off during the winter, that we bring some players down and have a hockey match. There are so many possibilities by them being interested in this. And these are all things that I've talked to them about, and I've never gotten them out. So I think we have some very, very exciting possibilities.
I'll simply say this. When I first met Mr. Seifel and he told me his connections, I thought, okay, maybe. I can tell you they are for real. And if he says this is a possibility, oh yes, it's definitely a possibility. He's had me meet some of the players, and I will tell you what, yes, we're on the verge of a tremendous partnership, public and private. So, did you want to share those for a moment?
I apologize. I believe I brought, when you see the players come out, how many of you have seen the CME sign when you're coming out of the locker room? The CME sign will no longer be there. This has been in my family since my great-grandfather. It's a war lance. And this will go, I'm donating it to the Blackhawks, so it will go in their locker room. And when you see them come out of the locker room, this is what you'll see this. And you'll see the casing. And like I say, they have an interest, obviously, because of their emblem, but they also have a real genuine interest. John McDonough, the chairman, Jay Blunt, another 2 men, Pete Hess, another 3 men. They're always at our powwows. They stay from beginning to end, and they really show a genuine interest in the culture. So thank you again for having me here tonight. I appreciate it, and hope to see you all again real soon. Thank you. There's a hockey stick sung by the whole team.
Cliff, did you want to? Cliff Bender is from Keeley Bender and Associates, one of their main owners, and he's going to show us the vision that we have as of this time.
Thanks. We're talking about a tough act to follow. Well, I will keep my comments brief. As architects, architects, we are firm believers in a picture's worth 1,000 words, so I'm going to jump to the photograph and the images here and run through it real quickly. Just a brief note. We were working with the city on a couple of other projects, and Tony mentioned the possibility of doing this Indian Culture Center, and we got a few bits of information. They were talking about the island at the time, and then it kind of drifted off. But more recently, we got a chance to do what you just did and experience, Scott, his enthusiasm and the history. And like you, or like most of you probably, we were unaware of a lot of that stuff, and it really is a head turner. So we're really excited about being here and being back on this site. As you can see, I think everyone has a diagram there, so I won't do much more to explain the general idea. In, I guess it was about 2000, I believe, the district bought the property that we are now on with the idea of expanding the campus that's to the west and trying to consolidate facilities. We looked at the new high school being in a number of locations closer to Kaler Road, ultimately where it is, and left the area to the south towards Kaler for whatever might come down the road. And when Tony contacted us maybe 4 or 5 months ago with the idea that the new location here might be a better location than the island, bigger space, and so on and so forth, we were excited about that. We've toured a couple of facilities and put together a program of what spaces might go in here. And what you see on the diagram, I'll jump to number 2, that's the existing school where we are right now. 3 and the numbers 3 represent future expansion, and 4, the auditorium that Dr. Pleasy mentioned. Those items had been pre-planned when we did the original building, so they're easily accomplished and set up to do that. Down where the yellow area is, that community center is, as the mayor mentioned, it's more than just an educational facility. There would be a multi-purpose facility, maybe a couple of them, a gymnasium with a walking track, another area that would be suitable for indoor soccer, things of that nature. There would also be a wellness and health and wellness center, a fitness center, all which would be supportive of that. We did discuss the auditorium, and the auditorium being a heartbeat of the Indian Culture Center. It seemed like building it adjacent to here where it's been master planned was a good idea, since things are in place already to do that. That's up for grabs and still for discussion. But then the rest of the site, there's plenty of acreage here to introduce walking paths and some native fields for culture and growing the way the Indians did things, and then there's additional open space for future expansion that might come along. So I think everyone can see from the diagram what the general idea is. It's important to emphasize this is very, very early in the process. We are just taking a few pieces that have been brought up and discussed and laying them out, just trying to get the things put together for starters. So with that, I'll hand it back to Scott.
Thank you, Phil. Tony, would you like to step forward and talk about our business partners?
As we're talking about the business partners, I think we talked enough about companies that are coming here. The one thing that is very unique about this area, I came here 5 years ago. One thing I knew about Wilmington was I rode my motorcycle through back in the 70s, and that was about it. So, Route 66 and the history it breaks around here, it just screams aloud about the corporations that want to give something back to the community. I think one of the things that we're realizing with the partnerships, the mayor elaborated, we're finding out, we start reviewing some of the major corporations in the area, they have a tribal relations division. They also have an environmental division in their mission plan to do that to the community. They also have education as a key component. So when we start looking at partners that are potential over here, it's a natural form. We show them some of these concepts already. One of the things that they are saying to us is, what's the next step? And one of the things that I think we'll be talking about as boards, we go back here and do towards is what Cliff talked about. We're going to need some type of diagrams that are going to be able to explain a little bit more detail on what we're talking about in the community center, what we're talking about in the Indian Cultural Center, the Auditorium Education Center. So that'll be something we'll talk about how we're going to pay for that, how we're going to work through that. And one thing about Hidden Vendor, it's all called right now. We never asked for a dime, never asked for, to be involved. They wanted to be involved. They thought there was enough value here in what we're doing. For them as architects, they want to give back. And that's what I'm finding out with the companies. They want to give back to the community. I believe it's doable. Dr. Cleasy's right. In the know who I am a little bit. When we say we want to get it done, we get it done. It has to do it to the boards working together. And that's going to be a key component. We'll have those meetings in regards to that. So as we're looking at this, key point, we go back to your boards. What is going to be the action steps you're going to be taking? And the first one's going to be, let's talk about how Hidden Vendor start designing just basic concepts that we can walk into the business partners and say, this is what we're looking to get done. Of course, part of the key concepts is going to be cost. As we're going to ask, what's going to cost an auditorium? How's that auditorium going to work? Before anybody like yourself goes out and talks, I have no problem taking all the risk in the world to talk to anyone, but it's always nice to have all the boards behind you so we can say it's truly a partnership, collaboration. They do their homework. We find out all the time when they come to our community that they're in our community once, weeks, sometimes years before, seeing if this is someplace they want to locate their business. So we got to be prepared when we say those words, we're all working together. It really means we're working together. And I think we can. I've seen it happen before. Our referendum didn't pass it because somebody just said it's time to pass it. They'll have to work pretty hard to do that. And I think hard work is for the benefit of this project. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything. Any questions? I don't know if I'll have any answers. We can always come back to you with those answers.
Is there a desired time frame that you guys are all looking at to have this completed by?
If we all agreed tonight this is it, yeah, it'd be nice to get this done in 5 years. I think we can, if funding is there, if we get the sponsorships.
Probably great. Everything has to work in phases, and I think that's one of the things we go to that discussion. What phase is most important, what's most critical? Naturally, we know the Native American portion, the pieces that key component, that they grow from there, start trying from there, potentially the auditorium and trying to grow. That's how we always discuss how we want to phase this whole project in the plan. And it's good to have everybody knows that what the plan is.
What we're hoping for as far as the Native American educational center, the auditorium, actually some artifact areas, that one we would be hoping to be starting within, I'm hoping, 12 to 16 months. And reason being, right now we have present administration, they have 2 years left. We want to work with that administration. Who knows what the next administration will be like in Washington or what the next Congress will be like. But right now, we know that we have a president whose wife is totally committed toward the Native Americans. There's what's right. All you can do is Google it, and you can see that. And it's something that is the right thing to do. And if we can work with them towards helping establish that, I think the time is now. So that would be our hopeful goal. But that's just the start. There's so much more, and as he said, 5 to 6 years from now, if we can have this all put together, it'd be fantastic. I'm sorry?
I don't want to rely on that. I mean, it's a project, and I think it's really not really need to start the actual phase of it. And how the federal government is great. But I think we all have to have the same understanding. Let's not rely on
tonight, the reason we gave you these nice maps and everything else, you're the ambassadors. And if we accomplish anything as staff, we have the ambassadors of good information that's out there. You can go out, every one of you know a lot of it. And you don't know who that person is that's going to make a difference. You can make a difference. Everyone in this room can make this happen. And you know, I truly believe you never know what's around that door when you show a vision plan and say, this is what we're thinking about doing. And all of a sudden you say, really? I've been waiting for somebody to say, I want to help. It's always money that's helpful.
And, you know, we're not waiting for the federal government, as you say, Mr. Mayor, because obviously the Chicago Blackhawks aren't waiting for it. They went ahead and said, let's get this foundation set up. So there's a lot of great synergy and hope to build on. But this was informational tonight. It's for each of the boards to hear this all at once. You can take this back, adjust it, and then we can go to our next steps. So,
Thanks.
I'm sorry, President Smith.
With this community center as a community,
Well, the land itself would probably be maintained, of course, by the school district. There'll be intergovernmental agreements as far as who would maintain the community center and various aspects of it. For instance, let's say there was an aspect of it that, well, let's say there was a library put up, okay? The library might share part of that with the city, with the school, but they'll all be worked through with various intergovernmental agreements with all parties working in tandem. Any other questions of anyone I could answer tonight? Or if not, then I'll turn it over to each of the presidents toward, I'm sorry? Yes. Please.
I do have a question. And it's kind of to elaborate a little bit more on what the mayor was saying. I mean, this is our wish list. But do we have a priority other than number 4 is probably the first thing on the priority list. But where does the list go? Because, you know, we're not going to be able to have all the funding to do it all without the schools. So what is the kind of priority list that you're thinking that you would like to go from project to project?
I think the mayor's word community. What does the community want to make a priority?
Okay.
So when we hear from the community, and each one of these boards going back to their community, then we'll work through it.
Well, I think what we'll do is this is address development. We'll have public forums that'll be set up with these type of places. We'll try to get input from the public, the general public, and people to understand, to get their feel what they feel is important to them and why it's evidence as we go through. So
some of these projects, like the community or organic farming or whatever, basically that's coming down to our special ed classes. We're going to break this into them when I come in, learn how to plant, but we're also talking about turning this into a community garden. So basically right now we have 2 acres, we can turn that 2 acres to 3 acres, 4 acres. How we're actually going to do it, not really sure. If we're going to turn around and plant 400 tomato plants, let people who work on it come get it, or people are going to get sections. But that's something that can happen very soon, very inexpensive. It's something that can happen right away. And it's getting back too, especially with the farmers market that's coming up we have now once a month. So. Right, sure. And the basis is going to be off our special ed. That's what we're basing off right now, is to help them get started, help our kids in school to learn. You know, I mean, we lost ag a long time ago here, and we're trying to get some of that back here. But that's something that can happen right away. That's not very expensive.